Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you are watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. Kiev's mayor says nearly every district came under massive dawn attacks, with 4 killed and dozens injured. Russia fired hundreds of drones and missiles while claiming it downed over 200 Ukrainian drones in retaliation. Gaza officials say Israel has handed over 15 Palestinian bodies a day after Hamas returned a 73-year-old hostage remains. Authorities are identifying the remains as these exchanges continue. Beijing firmly opposes the US approval of the $330 million arms sale to Taiwan, calling it a breach of the One China principle. The Foreign Ministry says the deal must be cancelled immediately. The UN Rights Council has opened a special session on Sudan to consider a fact-finding mission into its El Fasher killings. Chief Volker Turk calls the bloodshed a stain on the world as evidence is gathered for possible ICC action. Crude bombs exploded near Dhaka airport days before the verdict in ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's war crimes trial. Hasina is being tried in absentia for a 2024 crackdown and remains in India after last year's ouster. ASEAN observers will investigate a landmine blast on the Thai-Cambodia border that has jeopardized a US-brokered truce. Thailand accuses Cambodia of planting new PMN2 mines and has suspended the ceasefire. Chinese state TV says the Shenzhou 20 astronauts have safely landed after a delayed return. The crew touched down in northern China after months aboard the Tiangong station. The European Commission has approved ADNOC's €12 billion takeover of Germany's Convestro after the UAE firm offered competition remedies. Brussels says the deal is conditional on full compliance with those commitments. Indonesia has trained up to 20,000 troops for health and construction-related tasks in a planned peacekeeping mission in Gaza. The country, which is the world's most populous Muslim nation, is part of discussions with the United States alongside Azerbaijan, Egypt and Qatar for a multinational stabilization force. A draft proposal from Washington outlines plans for the force to demilitarize Gaza, secure its borders, protect civilians and support humanitarian aid. However, Indonesia has yet to confirm whether its troops will be deployed or the exact mandate they will operate under. Indonesian Defense Minister Sajfri Syamsuddin says the mission will focus on health and infrastructure and that the decision on troop deployment is still pending. Indonesia has long supported a two-state solution and condemned violence in Gaza. Any deployment would require a UN Security Council mandate, with Indonesia prepared to contribute up to 20,000 troops if approved. Joining us now is Major General Sudar Kaji. He is a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you. Of course, questions are being raised over who will be part of this force, who will contribute their peacekeepers, who will Israel be happy with, who will the rest of the region be happy with. Now, Indonesia says its peacekeepers will focus here on health and infrastructure. Does this signal that Jakarta expects a long-term stabilization mission on the ground here?
Thomas, good evening. Thank you. There is a lot of meaning and substance behind Indonesia's articulation. However, in international jurisdiction, in a conflict zone like Gaza, mere health and normalcy, law and order is not enough. One has to be prepared for any kind of eventuality that may crop up out of the blue. For example, there may be peace now, but a minute later it may turn out to be violent. So therefore, any peace board which comprises of multinational representations has to come under the United Nations flagship, and the United Nations flagship has got different charters from Charter 1 to Charter 7, Charter 8. Charter 7 also empowers the United Nations representatives to exercise control by enforcing law and order. So when the enforcement law is imposed, then one should be mentally and physically trained and prepared to ensure that they have to fight and bring normalcy in a combat situation. So if that happens, then perhaps to the best of my understanding about Indonesia's articulation would be, falling flat, and it will raise lots of questions than giving answers. Back to you, Thomas.
Yeah, is there any point in history that we can kind of compare this to when it comes to this kind of like international stabilization force in such a hostile place like, of course, Gaza is, and of course the withdrawal of Israeli troops is expected to happen as well. Once those international troops do go in, however they may be, what is it likely to be like on the ground, and how will these troops maintain order and peace?
Excellent, Thomas. You have put the finger on the right issue. I myself, I have been a military observer in Sierra Leone when things were really out of hand. Situation in Congo, situation in South Sudan. There are many examples in, I would say, Lebanon. Here in Israel itself, I would say, along the borders of Lebanon, the UNIFIL itself. So in multiple occasions, it has been always warranted and expected that the United Nations force must always be empowered in keeping with the prevailing circumstances in the environment. And depending on the emerging situation, the empowerment should be subjected to revision from time to time. Merely to say that stabilization forces physical presence itself is going to be good enough, I'm sorry, it is not going to be that easy. I have been myself in a very, very hostile situation like Sierra Leone. Despite everything being in our favor, when Fodo Sanko was being pushed around by Charles Taylor from Liberia, there was a very hostile and I would say very volatile situation. Despite being under the control of the ECOMOG, the things just went out of the blue, out of control, and people who were supposed to give us protection, they laid down the arms, went back to Nigeria and ECOWAS countries. So that was the kind of hostility and the volatility. So Israel is known for extremes and intense environments of hostility and volatility in the world order today. Therefore, it must have matching authority and powers to ensure stabilization of the situation. When you talk about the stabilization of the situation, one should be mindful of the fact that what the situation is. Situation is not diplomacy and dialogue. Situation is, exchange of fire. Kinetic components are being exchanged time to time.
Yes.
Despite all assurances and commitment for peace and normalcy, you still have, both the sides firing at each other. So therefore, in such kind of circumstances, I personally feel that it has to be much more than what is indicated in the statement of Indonesia.
Yes, Major General Sudarkaji, do stay with us for further stories, but thank you very much for bringing us your insight on that unfurling situation in the Middle East. We now move over to the United Kingdom for our next story. And resident doctors in England have begun a 5-day strike, marking the 13th walkout by members of the British Medical Association in their ongoing pay dispute. The strike, which affects both emergency and non-urgent care, will run until next Wednesday morning. With resident doctors comprising about half of the NHS workforce, hospitals are expected to face significant pressure during the action. However, NHS England has said that 95% of non-urgent procedures like hip and knee operations will continue, with consultants and senior doctors covering for the striking workers. Despite disruptions, NHS leaders estimate that the strike will cost around £240 million to manage. The situation comes as resident doctors in Scotland are also considering going on strike over similar pay concerns. Keith Vaz joins us. He's a former UK minister and he joins us live from London. Keith, always a pleasure. This is the 13th strike by resident doctors in the UK for NHS England. Do you think that the government has mismanaged this dispute to the point where strikes have almost become routine?
Well, it's very disappointing, but good morning from London, by the way. It's very disappointing that the doctors are on strike against a Labour government, because one of the cardinal principles upon which Keir Starmer and the Labour Party ran its election campaign is the importance of the NHS. And other sectors, for example, transport sectors, train drivers and others, have had big increases. So the doctors are saying, well, what about us? We need this rise because we've been suppressed as far as our wages is concerned for many, many years under previous governments. And here we have a Labour government that needs to really make sure that we are getting the rate for the job. Now, although the NHS management is now saying that they will manage the strike and people won't lose out in terms of operations, I mean, I myself was waiting for an operation from the NHS, and I had to do the best I could waiting for that. I know other people who are actually waiting for a year for a hip replacement operation. So from that point of view, I'm worried that people are going to have to be in pain and waiting for much longer. This is a strike that's going to be settled. You and I both know you don't take on the firefighters, you certainly don't take on the nurses, and you don't take on the doctors, because they are the very basis of the National Health Service. And I think that they've fallen behind as far as that pay is concerned. Wes Streeting, who's the Health Secretary, as you know, has been involved in this potential coup against Keir Starmer that was not happening, and he knows nothing about it. I think he's a very good Health Secretary, and I think he is of the same mind as people in the health service. So I would be surprised if he did not use his considerable communication skills in order to try and settle this matter. At the end of the day, talking is one thing, cash on the table is another, and you really do not want to take on the doctors.
Yeah, and Keith, just briefly, of course, you mentioned there that this is happening underneath a Labour government, of course, a relatively new government, but this is, once again, this is the 13th time this has happened, and resident doctors make up half of the National Health Service workforce. How much political responsibility should the government bear for letting these relations deteriorate to this level?
I think that of course, they have to have responsibility. They're the government. I mean, one of the things they do is manage the NHS. And Wes Streeting decided that he was going to abolish the quango that was running the NHS England, and replace it with himself. So he's running the NHS now, and therefore he will take responsibility. He's not the guy, I've known him for many years, he's not the kind of guy who is not going to take responsibility. But you do have to come to a conclusion that this needs to be settled. They have to settle this. One, for the goodwill of the doctors themselves, but secondly, and more importantly, for the patients. I've just come back from India, and I visited a couple of hospitals. By the way, today is World Diabetes Day, so can I urge all your listeners and viewers, including you, to go and take a diabetes test, because that's one way of preventing going to hospital in the first place, by knowing you've got diabetes. But when I went to India recently, I found a large number of people who actually were coming to India and having their operations because they felt it was quicker, more efficient, and cheaper than having it in the UK. So we're on a slippery slope here. We need to really settle this dispute. And I think the doctors are going to be saying, we need it. Otherwise, if you don't give it to us, we're going to go to Australia, we're going to go to the United States. We have got the skills necessary to go anywhere in the world, including in India. So they need to get on with this and settle this strike. We don't want a 14 strike for sure.
Yeah, indeed, Keith. Thank you very much for joining us. Some great insight there. Thank you very much for taking the time and talking to us, as always. We now move on over and we move to South Asia. And former Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has denied committing crimes against humanity in connection with the deadly crackdown on protests that led to her ousting in August of 2024. Speaking in her first exclusive interview since fleeing the country, Hasina dismissed the trial against her as a farce and a kangaroo court, claiming it was politically motivated. Hasina faces charges related to the killings of hundreds of protesters during a student-led uprising against her autocratic rule, with prosecutors seeking the death penalty. The former Prime Minister has rejected the accusations that she ordered security forces to open fire on unarmed civilians, though leaked audio suggests she authorized the use of lethal force. Security around the tribunal in Dhaka has been tightened as the verdict approaches. Hasina, now residing in India, also faces separate charges of corruption and human rights abuses from her 15-year rule, including involvement in secret jails and extrajudicial killings. Major General Sudhakar joins us once again to discuss this ongoing situation. We've seen this interview from Sheikh Hasina. We can't show it here on the channel. It was conducted with the BBC. However, fascinating to hear her words and fascinating to see her after, of course, she fled to India. She labels this case against her, where she's being tried in absentia, as a kangaroo court, a farce. Does Hasina's statements have any weight here, Major General? I believe you muted yourself. Okay, I think we have some audio issues. Apologies there. We will hopefully get that sorted out very soon. Of course, we are talking about Sheikh Hasina. Okay. Apologies there. Major General Sudhakar joins us once again. I just want to repeat the question. Hasina has called these charges a farce, a kangaroo court. Do these statements have weight?
Absolutely. In fact, it is slightly late. In fact, she should have come up a little earlier. But better late than never. I would compliment her, Sheikh Hasina, to have spoken her heart out. The reality of the matter is that the International Crimes Tribunal, which has issued an arrest warrant in early 2025 targeting Hasina and key former officials for crimes against humanity, to the best of my understanding, one has had adequate exposure in the global apex organizations and related organizations. This ICT does not have, unfortunately, any locus standi nor any authority to do what they're trying to exercise. If at all something is to be done, then there is the International Court of Justice. They are empowered and authorized to take. For that, a matter has to go up to the United Nations. The Security Council has to take an order. Because here you are trying to oust the elected leader of a country which is actually turning out to be an epitome of democracy in the Islamic world. That has to be understood. So therefore, and the whole thing has come about, I'm glad that she's speaking out aloud. You see, there are concurrent activities which are taking place down the order. And if you join the dots, Tulsi Gabbard, who's the Director of National Intelligence of the United States, during her visit to IISS International Studies, the think tank, she has given out a statement that United States of America, or the Washington, is already decisive on its course of action with regard to pulling back its involvement from regime change activities in countries in the world. That's a very remarkable statement or reflection from Tulsi Gabbard. And there has been an intense debate in the United States. And soon after that, Donald Trump himself I have been given to understand by very credible and reliable sources, he has given very clear indications that Washington he would like to pull back from all such kinds of avoidable activities, which is resulting in lots of deaths, lots of loss of revenue, and wasteful expenditure of the United States. So that's a clear indication, and I'm also very optimistic that there is some kind of a track two going on, and right feedback has gone to Sheikh Hasina, and if not late, the right articulations at the right place and time has been made by her. There is no place for such kind of activities by Yunus which should be allowed from the soil of Bangladesh, lest you are inviting creation of another Iran in 21st century, much against well accomplished and established democratic norms in the Islamic world. Back to you, Thomas.
Yeah, and what can you tell us about the support that Sheikh Hasina still has in Bangladesh? Of course, we've seen riots, we've seen explosions even in the Bangladeshi capital leading up to this verdict. What can you tell us about the tensions in Bangladesh right now in regards to her?
See, from 5th of August 2024, Thomas, I would say a lot of water have flown down the Ganges or Padma River, and lots of every day there are so many significant turn of events taking place. Yes, we understand Jamaati Islam and lots of convicts have been released from the jail, and so much so the jihadis who were earlier apprehended for on grounds of staging attacks against Indian security forces, civilian population, they also have been released. And there is a thing called as Rohingya Four Brotherhood Alliance has promoted. ISI has come in a big way. Hamas also has come in a big way. There is a clamor for greater Bangladesh in form of a cartographic warfare. Under this backdrop, I personally feel there is a majority in favor of Awami League today. They have been disallowed. They have been banned by the present interim government. That ban has to be lifted. And between you and me, Thomas, you will appreciate that if you go onto the political dynamics between BNP and Awami League, the Awami League still enjoys a popularity which is much more than 51%. Much more than 51%. It is just that they have been denied and their recognition, they are being disallowed to participate in the forthcoming election. Therefore, there is a kind of a violent upsurge taking place in the Bangladesh. This is going to douse, this is going to calm down with the US's support and intervention. I am very hopeful and optimistic that brighter days are ahead. There will be inclusive kind of election. If at all it takes place in February, Awami League will be allowed to participate. All that Sheikh Hasina is saying, let there be an participative involvement of the population, entire population in the election. Let there be inclusiveness in the election. Let it be a democratic form of government as it was existing earlier in the past. That is all she is demanding. And if that happens, I'm sure that day is not far when Sheikh Hasina will be back. There will be the regime, most probably by the mandate of the people, she is the one who will be restored status quo ante back to her power.
Okay, Major General Sadaq Haji, thank you very much as always. It's always a pleasure hearing your insight on these matters. We now move on over to Europe, and US officials have said that Swiss ministers have had positive talks in Washington in a bid to cut US President Donald Trump's steep 39% tariffs on Swiss exports to the US, which is the highest in Europe. A senior US official has said that the Swiss were very aware of their trade deficit and were prepared to address it. Swiss Economics Minister Guy Parmelin, meanwhile, said the two sides had clarified almost everything in the talks. Switzerland has been trying to bring down the tariff rate, which has hit the country hard for months. Swiss Economy Minister Guy Parmelin and Chief Negotiator Helene Budliger-Arteia, who travelled to Washington, have said that they are hopeful amid suggestions that the 39% tariff may be reduced to 15%, the same as Switzerland's neighbours in the EU. Now we move, and London's High Court rules that Australian mining giant BHP is liable for one of Brazil's worst environmental disasters, potentially paving the way for billions of pounds in compensation. A dam collapse in 2015 at an iron ore mine run by a firm co-owned by BHP killed 19 people and unleashed a deluge of thick, toxic mud into villages, fields, rainforests, rivers and the ocean. The eventual trial at the High Court in London ran from October in 2024 to March of this year, and the court has already begun preparing the second phase of the case to determine potential damages and compensation. During the trial, the claimant's lawyers argue that BHP was aware that toxic sludge was accumulating at the facility in Minas Gerais state, north of Rio de Janeiro, at rates that far exceeded the annual limit. According to the lawyer, the buildup contributed to the disaster at the mine, which was managed by Samarco, co-owned by BHP and Brazilian miner Vale. Now, an Australian man, Johnson Wen, has been charged after jumping over a barricade and grabbing actress Ariana Grande at the Wicked for Good premiere in Singapore. A video shows Wen pushing past photographers and rushing towards Grande as she walked down the yellow carpet, with co-star Cynthia Erivo stepping in to protect the stunned singer. The 26-year-old posted on Instagram that she was free after being arrested, but was later charged in court. Reports indicate Wen intends to plead guilty. This is not the first disruptive incident. Wen has previously crashed events, including concerts by Katy Perry and the Chainsmokers. Fans have expressed outrage, accusing him of re-traumatizing Grande, who survived the 2017 Manchester bombing attack. Security at the event has also faced criticism for not preventing the breach. If convicted, Wen will face a fine of around $1,500. Okay, that is all that we have time for this hour, but do keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.